I'm Luke Summerhays, and I love Zekrom. With each new Pokemon generation, it seems as though the monsters on the box become more involved in the story. Generation 1 just used the starters, then Ho-Oh and Lugia were kind of side plots. Generation 3 involved Kyogre and Groudon in the plot around Team Aqua and Magma. Then Diamond and Pearl continue that trend even further. By the time we got to Black and White, the player and the rival are each catching and using very story-significant legendary dragons. So the legends go. Long ago, Reshiram and Zekrom were the same dragon, who was the partner of a pair of brothers. When the two brothers took different paths, one of truth and one of ideals, the dragons split into the white Reshiram and the black Zekrom. The ensuing battle between the two brothers and their heirs led to destruction and the two dragons being sealed away. Zekrom is the dragon of Ideals, a black electric and dragon type Pokemon, which appears on Pokemon White. Just as Reshiram embodied Yang, so Zekrom embodies Yin. It is black in colour, of course, and as the electrical output, it has a more passive role in the turbine process than the fire of Reshiram. On the other hand, it subverts expectations. Yin is traditionally feminine, whereas Zekrom has muscular, masculine features, and Reshiram is drawn with more traditionally feminine curves. Truth is a constant, whereas ideals are an active force. Of course, this all makes perfect sense. There is yin in the yang, and yang in the yin. Pokemon Black tells us, concealing itself in lightning clouds, it flies throughout the Unova region. It creates electricity in its tail. Pokemon White tells us, this Pokemon appears in legends. In its tail, it has a giant generator that creates electricity. And Black 2 and White 2. This legendary Pokemon can scorch the world with lightning. It assists those who want to build an ideal world. Welcome back to Moils on Mon, Zekrom.
It's our box boy.
For which
I really
game?
like. For Black, right?
Ba-ba!
It's on White.
Yep.
What?
Yeah, because the Pokemon Black has a black box with a white Pokemon. A Pokemon White has a white box with a black Pokemon.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, to be fair, if I remember rightly, both. It makes sense from a design standpoint.
Yeah.
It wouldn't look. You can't have a black background and a black mon. It wouldn't really work. But I guess both the legendaries. The advantage is both the legendaries are in the story quite prominently. So.
Yes.
Whichever one you don't get, N gets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the whole kind of final battles revolved around that, which is, we spoke about that in our Gen 4, Gen 5, kind of thoughts video podcast, and big fan of that. Zekrom, cool lad, cool legendary. I was never a big fan of the big tails on Zekrom or Reshiram, but
alright. Let's get into it a little bit. Those tails, they're supposed to look kind of like engines, right?
Yes, I can kind of see what they're going for.
Like jet engines.
Mm-hmm.
Like these two jets, and then you find them in the big desert where they caused a disaster in the past.
Oh.
These jets caused a big disaster in New York.
Wow. I mean...
Yeah.
Yeah. That's I mean, just their type as well, Dragon Fire, Dragon Electric, you know.
Yep.
That's an interest. I never thought of that before.
I didn't think of it on my own, but I saw it online and now I can't not think of it. Like, it can't be an accident.
No, definitely not. I mean, it's...
But they can't have actually made 9/11 Pokemon, surely.
I mean... it would be bold.
You talked earlier when we were talking about Axie about how you have to have a dragon on your team.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I don't in this gen is because it really feels appropriate to have the legendary on your team because of the whole thing with N.
I guess so, yeah.
So I usually do end up, once I get this guy or the other, or Reshiram, then using it through to the end of the game.
I don't think I did in my initial run, but I totally think that's a very valid take to use it on your team.
Unlike Reshiram's Pokemon Sword Pokedex entries, which flirt dangerously with these being jet plane Pokemon, Zekrom is explicitly a turbine. When the interior part of its tail spins like a motor, Zekrom can generate many bolts of lightning to blast its surroundings. That said, just as with Reshiram, the process of splitting and battling was still destructive. Pokemon Shield tells us, "Mythology tells us that if people lose the righteousness in their hearts, their kingdoms will be razed by Zekrom's lightning." Interestingly, this is a game made by Japanese developers, and perhaps their understanding of Manhattan includes the Manhattan Project, which, did kind of raise their kingdom, and was dropped by some airplanes. So maybe this isn't so much a 9/11 Pokemon as it is a Hiroshima Pokemon. Zekrom had a similar trajectory in the competitive scene to Reshiram. When introduced, its electric and dragon typing was unique, and it was a pretty powerful monster. But the rise of Mega Pokemon, and the return of other legendaries, was a big issue. It did have a little more staying power than Reshiram, thanks to its moves filling more unique roles, and things like Tailwind and Dragon Dance, letting it make up for its low speed stat. Friend of the show Mikey from Pokemon Crossroads has once again been in touch to tell us about the impact of Zekrom in the trading card game. Zekrom, the other half that changed the modern day Pokemon TCG, along with Reshiram. And we do mean that in a big way. And was Zekrom big? It entered the game with 130 HP in Black and White base set. You can start with Zekrom in the active and let it soak hits for turns. Though you would not want to do that if you were facing a Zekrom. That is because Zekrom had the infamous Outrage attack. Outrage did a base 20 damage, plus 10 more for each damage counter on it. If by some feat you were able to survive the onslaught of Outrage, then you will not be surviving the next attack, Bolt Strike. While it didn't win any World Championships, Zekrom was feared on the local and regional level. A single Zekrom could use Bolt Strike as early as turn 1, with the ZPST, aka Zekrom Donk deck. ZPST would involve Zekrom as the main attacker, and Pachirisu from Call of Legends. Pachirisu had the self-generation ability that allows it to attach 2 lightning energy from your hand onto it when you play Pachirisu from your hand. You will then use Shaymin from Heart Gold Soul Silver Unleashed for its Celebration Wind ability. When you put Shaymin in your hand to your bench, then you can move any number of energy cards attached to your Pokemon in any way you want. Usually you want to attach them to Zekrom so you can use Bolt Strike. Rarely would any card in the active survive that hit so early in the game. Then, as we said before, Bolt Strike would do damage to itself, which only fueled Outrage for later in the game. Zekrom would later return during Sun and Moon to change the game once again. Enter Pikachu and Zekrom GX from Team Up. Once again, Zekrom helped redefine what Big Basic meant by having 240 HP. Pikachu and Zekrom GX will go on to win the 2019 Pokemon World Championships in the Juniors division for Haruki Miyamoto as Pikarom Judge, an oppressive deck that will constantly limit your opponent's hands using cards like Judge and Let Loose Marshadow, simply making it impossible for opponents to retaliate. Zekrom cards may not always see play, but when they do, they can change the format with how shocking they can be. Thanks, Mikey. I did know Reshiram and Zekrom had famous cards, but I couldn't have told you any of the details. Look at the podcast transcript to see some of the extra details which I left out. Pokemon Black and White were a controversial pair of games, releasing with 2D sprite art so close to the 3DS, replacing the whole Pokédex, and leaning harder than ever into scripted storytelling. They are actually the worst-selling core Pokemon games, and the series took a big change in direction after them, with 3D graphics and many more returning monsters. Yet, despite this, or perhaps because of it, the games are remembered extremely fondly by long-term fans today. Just as truth and ideals cannot exist without one another, so Pokemon games need to embrace both the old and the new. Hopefully we'll see that in Black 3 and White 3, or maybe Pokemon Legends Kyurem, or Vanta Black and Opal White, or Pokemon Grey. Who knows? Original music for Luke Loves Pokemon is by Jonathan Cromie. Artwork for the show is by Katie Groves. Funding is provided by listeners at Patreon. If you enjoy this podcast and want to check out other shows by me and my friends, head to podcastiopodcastius.org. I love hearing from listeners. Get in touch about upcoming Pokemon on Twitter or Facebook at Luke Loves PKMN, or Blue Sky at Podcast. Drop a comment if you're watching the video, or a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Coming up are Landorus and Kyurem, so please get in touch about those or any other monsters. And even if you don't feel like doing any of that, thank you so much just for listening. I love Zekrom, and remember, I love you too.